Okay, we're back again here in Mission Control, and we've got Craig Mackie here, who's another Queensland-based modeller. He lives probably about an hour and 10 minutes away from me, up towards Brisbane, and he's got a very interesting layout that's actually based on a prototype line. And there's op sessions at Craig's. I haven't been to one for quite a while. But yeah, he keeps threatening me, so I'll definitely get there soon. Anyhow, Craig, I'll hand it over to yourself.
Thanks, Marty. Good evening to everyone in the Asia Pacific area, and happy Anzac Day. And good morning, I suppose, to most of the world. So as Marty said, I'm in Brisbane, not far from Marty. Again, not far from Darren Lee from earlier on, and not far from Duncan. And in fact, we're all on last night talking about this actual event. So I'll just fire up a PowerPoint and start talking about it. So Marty, just give me a yell when you're ready to maximize that. And helps if I actually share it, hey? That's good. So basically, I've got a blog and it's called Craig's Shed. And other people know me by the name of Cassino. So basically, back in 2005, in fact, it was 2004, my second child was born, and I got kicked out of a purpose-built train room in the house. So that then became a playroom for my two children, and I had to build a shed, and that became Craig's Shed. And that is the shed just before the equipment was moved out of the train room in the house. It was lined or insulated, lined, power was put to it and painted, and my daughter's sitting there watching the cricket. And I think that's a test match at the Gabba, and Australia is walloping the Poms back in 2005. So the shed has morphed into a train layout. So some facts. Basically what I'm modelling is the New South Wales North Coast. I stick to the period from 1985 to 1991, and it is DCC. It was designed to host just, half a dozen operators, because I didn't think I'd end up with more than 5 or 6 friends. But we can easily handle 13 operators. And there's also an extra position called North Coast Control. And that's where I am today, sitting in the North Coast Control position, streaming out to the world. So the aim of the layout was we needed to run decent sized trains. So the trains could be, 10, 12, 14 foot long. And the train had to run through a location. None of this circles around a 8x4 board, although some people, that's all the space they've got. And I'm pretty lucky because I've got a big shed to put a decent sized layout in. So basically, I needed to have distance between locations. The whole layout is single track, and trains run across the single track via crossing loops from point A to point B. And basically all the crew who drive the trains to conditions according to the timetable and follow the instructions in the timetable. So initially, the layout was from Grafton Yard to Acacia Ridge Yard, and of course it was via the main location called Cassino. And then we installed the Cassino to Murwillumbah branch. And of course, I think it was basically a dare that the layout was extended from Acacia Ridge Yard to South Brisbane Interstate. So there's a little bit of modeller's license here in that in the time period from 1986, I think, South Brisbane never existed. The actual trains in Brisbane ran through to Roma Street Station. So there's a little bit of modeller's license with the having South Brisbane existing in a 1991 time period. So as the layout extended, we also included the Dutton Park to Fisherman's Islands branch. And then, again, because there were such good models coming out, I needed to put some 12 mil in and model the Queensland outline. And of course, that runs from Acacia Ridge to Fisherman Islands. So there's a number of locations that are modelled on the layout. Some of these are crossing loops, some of these are sidings. So you can see there's quite a few actual locations. And a number of them have narrow gauge infrastructure on them. So they've been highlighted there in blue. Again, we run a decent assortment of trains. They're passenger trains. There's models of historical trains that no longer ply the rails. There's goods trains of almost every description, standard New South Wales North Coast trains. And again, there's a whole lot of infrastructure trains as well. Things that I think modellers like to run between all of the goods trains that run. And of course, there's some what we might call some of these, bulk grain and bulk coal funds are not necessarily available. And I've
Craig,
only
I'm just going to interrupt if you don't mind for a sec.
Yep. Yep.
Can you just close your PowerPoint and we might have to pick this up again? It's just brought up a Norton's protection on the Facebook feed. So,
So do you want me to start it again, or?
No, I will wait until Martin can clear this because I'm actually locked out of this screen, I believe. So if you completely close the share screen, that'd be good. And we'll see how this works. So I'm not sure if that's going to solve it or if this is Martin's end of the stream, but we'll continue having a bit of a chat. We'll just have a bit of a chat until Martin sorts out the difficulties. Look, so far about your layout, I'll chime in with some early questions. The location, very interesting to model a railway that actually crosses the state border here in Australia, and it definitely offers some good modelling.
So basically where that all started, when I went to school, I used to catch the train to school, and I went to school at South Brisbane, and on my way to school, I would see the actual New South Wales trains and the Queensland trains running side by side. We'd be catching a train home and we'd get passed by the standard gauge trains going to New South Wales, the Brisbane Limited in the afternoon. And I suppose that gave me the incentive to try and model what I saw in my childhood.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. Now, that junction over the border here in New South Wales, Queensland, there was a gauge change, if I correct myself. It's probably well before my time, so you'll have to fill in the blank spots for me. But how did that actually work in theory and in practice?
Well, the original railway line between New South Wales, well, Sydney and Brisbane went via Wallangarra, and there was a change of gauge there. When the layout or the railway was built up through the North Coast, it was built standard gauge up through Kyogle, and then the Queensland Railways built a narrow gauge railway south from Beaudesert. It met up in the Border Ranges, and then they changed the gauge from 3'6" to 4'8.5", and went back, moved the inside rail out one so that the trains could get through to South Brisbane, and that was about 1930.
Definitely before more time, so I'm glad you could fill me in on that information. So we're just having a few difficulties here with the Australian stuff. Martin's working pretty hard at trying to resolve this, but we'll continue the chat. It can be a bit of a podcast from us Australian guys down here, and we'll just continue it on, Craig, at the moment.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, keep going.
I was about to say that before you jumped in and Norton's got involved, my bulk coal train is 4 wagons long. There's nothing big about some of my Queensland Rail stuff, and a lot of the wagons that I'm putting together are all being scratch built because of the funds don't exist to go out and buy stuff and just plonk it on the railway line.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So it looks like we're back up on the stream. So if you want to pull your PowerPoint back up, and Martin can bring that back up to full screen, and we'll continue on.
So you had fun with Norton. All I had to do was go to the toilet for 2 minutes.
Okay, well, so the next screen, so we actually do run timetable sessions on the layout, and that's the example of all the trains that run on the layout in I call it a 24-hour session, but it's actually about 26 hours. So there's 108 trains. Not everything runs, but everything has a place. There are crosses, there are overtaking manoeuvres, and that's why we need someone called North Coast Control to ensure that the trains get to where they need to go. And that is an A3 sheet of paper, and it's really difficult to read. So we've broken it down into 3 8-hour shifts, which is a little bit easier to read for North Coast Control. And we do have someone who does put his hand up to operate as North Coast Control, and he's actually one of the other master model railroaders up here, Arthur Hayes. So the stats about the layout. The shed is in the old Imperial 40 by 20 or a 12 metre by 6 metre. It's insulated, lined. It's got a beer fridge and a sink. It's air conditioned. And for medicinal purposes, my beer fridge is less than a hand length to my right. So the other special items about the layout, as I said before, it's single track with crossing loops and sidings. Because it is single track and we're modelling the New South Wales North Coast, we have a staff system which was used by the North Coast to control access to the single track. And when I talk about North Coast Control, that's a dispatcher to the American outline modelers out there. So basically, we've got LED lights up underneath the baseboard, and bit by bit, more mini scenes are developing around the layout. And we are modelling what used to occur on a Sunday on the New South Wales North Coast, because the signalman had the day off. There weren't that many trains running, and the drivers who were driving the trains had to work their own trains through the crossing loops. So they would throw the points, or they'd leave the points set for the next train coming whichever way it was, and they'd set the signals, and they'd go into the crossing loop, sync their staff, and take the next staff for the next section once they had permission from the control down at Newcastle, I think it was. So I said earlier on that what we're trying to do is have distance between locations, and some of that distance is generated by going through spirals. So what I really didn't want to do was to have the front of the train at one location while the back was still in the previous location. And while I tried to do that, there are two locations where it does actually happen. And the distance between a couple of crossing loops is like 3.5 feet. But you don't really know it. So the system is DCC. I run the NCE system, which a huge number of people up in Brisbane do. And of course, we run JMRI for all the people who want to use a mobile phone to access and control a train. So to give you some scale, the distance between Grafton Yard and Cassino is 22 metres. So that's the track length. From Cassino to Murwillumbah, it's a further 38.8 metres. And Grafton, all the way to Acacia Ridge Yard, which was the first end point of the layout, was 101 metres. And that's quite a decent run, going through a number of crossing loops. And then when it was extended, we went to 135 metres when we got to South Brisbane Interstate. And the very small Fisherman Islands branch is only 9.5 metres. So there's the initial planning for the layout was done using a grid paper. And that shows what's happening here. So Grafton is down here, the trains come out and they go round a spiral to gain distance to run along the back. So this is the original plan, and the locations and the track work is pretty accurate except for one. This loop here, which I said was Leeville, is actually Rapville. It goes through over the Richmond River into Cassino. From Cassino, it comes round here to Old Cassino. Again, it runs a spiral, so the train sort of disappears and comes out of hiding and goes to Lismore. And then at the other end, it does the same again, goes around a spiral and ends up at Murwillumbah. And of course, there's a number of industries at the far end of Murwillumbah. So one thing that has to be said about the layout, there is no flat track. Everything is on a gradient. The gradient could be 0.5% or 0.25%, but it is on a gradient. So if we were to go straight ahead through Cassino, we come around here to the Cassino Meatworks, and then it goes up through a helix to the next level. So the next level, we come out of the helix, we pass the Namoona ballast siding, and then we come into Ferry Hill crossing loop. Then we come into Kyogle, and then across the upper Richmond River Bridge, and then we get into Cougal Spiral. And it's one of two spirals that existed inside New South Wales. The other was Bethungrel. And then from there it goes into Border Loop. Now Border Loop is actually right along the baseboard edge there. So it moved a little bit. And then it comes out through here, and that tunnel through there models the Queensland-New South Wales border. And then it comes around through the running creeks. There's a number of creeks and tunnels. The track is visible, and then it goes into another tunnel, as it does in the New South Wales North Coast. And then it runs through here. And then I've located a siding, a crossing loop there, which is called the Risk. It's actually modeller's license there because it's actually before Border Loop, not after. and then we come into Glenap, and then it comes into Acacia Ridge. And basically Acacia Ridge is like that, and that was the layout for a number of years before it was extended. But when I extended it, I didn't go to the trouble of building or do the planning as such a detail. So you're left with what's happened here. So the top diagrams here show Acacia Ridge narrow gauge. So there's runaround tracks, there's some sidings, and then the track goes further north from Acacia Ridge towards Fisherman Islands. It exits stage left there and comes back in here past Rocklea sidings. Rocklea is a mixture of narrow gauge and standard gauge. And then it actually extends further to the right here, and that's Clapham Yard. Again, it's a mixture of standard gauge and narrow gauge, and of course there's some dual gauge trackage. And that's the Urongpilly Loco, which we call Loco Pilly in the layout. And then the track runs up further in this direction, and it branches off into Fisherman Islands. Again, standard gauge at the front, narrow gauge at the back, and a dual gauge track down through the middle. And what I haven't got are any diagrams of the next two locations, which are Park Road siding and South Brisbane Interstate. So in order to control access to the layout, we use the staff system. So if we've got a crossing loop down here and the next one and the third one up the line, if there's no train in that single track section, the staff at each of the crossing loops for that section will show as green. And as soon as someone at either end takes a staff, as has happened at this end, both of those LEDs light red. So we know that there's a train travelling in this section. So that's the whole concept of the staff system. And there's about 15 staff sections around the layout. And there's also a number of intermediate staff locations where a siding exists and a train can be put away in the siding out of harm's way so that future trains or other trains can then continue their traffic up and down the main line. So there's a picture of the, I suppose, the brains of the system. We've got a master on-off switch there. And as I say in my day job at work, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So there is an ammeter on every power district, and which I can turn on or off, or cut in or out, and I can isolate all those power districts. And someone with a keen eye and a big enough screen who can see the detail there will see that it's putting out about 13.7 volts. And with no trains running on the layout, it's pulling about 1.5 amps. So that's Grafton heading north. That's the Richmond River just before Cassino. That's Cassino. So it is, while it's been taken 15 years to get this far, it still is under construction. And the plan is that I'm going to build all the houses that back onto the railway line at Cassino. So there are pictures up on the previous deck that show various houses or scenic items which I will build eventually. So there's a shot of Lismore. Again, the platform hasn't been built there yet, but it's just a lump of ply. And just zooming back there, you will see that there's a couple of purple trees. So that sort of sets us in the October timeframe in the New South Wales North Coast when the jacarandas are flowering. And there's a number of jacarandas on the layout. So this is Namuna ballast siding, the Kugel spiral. Again, everything, well, most of the things on the layout have been scratch built. So the bridge there was scratch built. There's a number of fettlers camps all through the layout. And that's the deck above Cassino. At Border Loop, there's in the background there another fettlers camp, but there's also an incinerator that's someone's burning off an old sleeper to make give some warmth to the poor fettlers. And this is the other end of the loop at Border Loop. And what I try to do is replicate what was that location many years ago. So someone posted a photo of the signal box and the platform there, and bit by bit I'm trying to replicate that. Again, the signal box hasn't been painted, but it will eventually be painted, and a few trees will be put in there. So this split screen here on the right shows Fisherman Islands. That's the narrow gauge yard is on the right, the dual gauge is right down the middle, and the standard gauge is on the left. And the left photo shows Grafton right down the bottom with the loops, and then at the top there is Acacia Ridge Yard. And then you can see above Acacia Ridge, only about 6 inches above, there's the location for Rockley sidings. So that's Clapham Yard, again, standard gauge and narrow gauge. And in the distance there is Locopilly. Here we come round to Park Road sidings. And on the right, the next shot shows what's happening at South Brisbane Interstate. Again, some of these locations are about 5'6" off the ground, and there's a couple of small stools that you can stand on that lift you up so you can see what the points are, how the points are set. And again, a lot of the point control for the top deck is all using NCE mini panels controlling Pico point motors. So North Coast Control, where I'm sitting right now, that's his diagram of the layout. And he can move magnets around to track where trains are, where the train crew calls in and says, I want permission to go from, for example, Kyogle to Border Loop. And the North Coast Control will give him access. But while I did a lot of planning, I didn't do enough planning. Trains in Australia mostly run what they call up and down, where they're east and west over in the States, I understand. So on this layout, the up trains actually go down on this board, and the down trains actually go up. So it was a massive fail by me to plan the layout like that. So you'll see there's a small bit of ply with a push button and 2 plug-in points. So that's the headset system that my crew use to access North Coast Control, and it's a push to talk. And between and to the right and left of that, you'll see the staff system. So on the far right, you've got Grafton Rapville, and there's a train in that section. And you'll see on the far left, that's the staff box, the signal box at Rapville. which has the 2 staff machines, one for the section Rapville Grafton and the other for the section Rapville Cassino. And it's showing there's no trains in use using the track between Rapville and Cassino. So there's a picture of some of the crew. You can see their headsets. You can also see that they've got like a lanyard around their neck. So that lanyard allows them to have their timetable card. There's a few more crew. So I print up the timetable cards using perforated paper, and they get printed out before each session. And there's a blow up of number 11 pickup goods. And that number 11 drops off a number of wagons at locations. And I think Marty was talking earlier about he couldn't see the numbers on the N scale wagons at Duncan's place. I can't see the HO ones at my place. So that's why there's numbers there which question marks. I still can't read the numbers off the cards, or off the wagons. So the other thing that we do around the layout, I'm starting to create some things that people can find. So I have a mate who keeps giving me things. So I've got monkeys driving tractors, an actual clown climbing a bridge, and we've got Bigfoot in the border ranges somewhere as well. So that is the end of the first section there. Now, the other thing that I've got is a couple of videos. So hopefully we can share helps if I
There were certainly a few familiar faces in those operator photos.
Yes. So we've got the first video. We've got a train that's going to leave Grafton Yard and head to Cassino. So hopefully no. So that's the train sitting in Grafton Yard this morning. And it's heading out of the storage loops. So is that being shared, Marty?
Yeah, I believe so.
So that position there is 0.0 on the layout, 0 kilometres. And again, scratch-built bridge. Homemade tunnel portals. Huge spider just to the right as we went through there. Speed signs on the left. Funny looking train controller on the left there. So this is the Rockler sleeper siding, which the fence is only half completed on. Past Baker's Farm. Housewife hanging up the washing. And of course, now we come into Rapful Loop, and there's a train sitting in front of us. So what normally happens, the train slows to a stop. He sinks his staff for that section. The signalman's there who gives him the staff for the next section and takes this one. And then the train that's heading south on the left-hand track will continue. And of course, we'll continue north, heading towards Cassino. Again, there's no scenery around that area yet. This is the start of the scenery. That's Hotham Street. In fact, that's the Bruxner Highway south of Cassino. And we've got the Benalbo ballast siding to our left. And all these fettlers around the place are replacing sleepers. You see all these sleepers around. And this is a kit-bashed bridge. I've extended the number of sections in it that make up the bridge. And this is arriving at Cassino Station. So in 1991, there was a section of concrete sleepered track just through the platform. And that was the year when that station building that we just went under was pulled down. Again, Fettler's sheds. The Moolumbar branch is off to the right there. And this is the Cassino signal box. And Cassino Loco is just in front of us there. So that's the first video there of a track. So I'll stop sharing that one. And I can cue the second one. So the train now continues north from Cassino. And a mate of mine built the Cassino coal stage. It's a work of art. Who actually got a couple of modelling prizes from building that just to the right there. Now the track at Cassino or the Loco area is actually depressed compared to the main line. So this is the Hotham Street level crossing. And you see there's a jacaranda to the right, a few cows to the left. And it was only 2 weeks ago that I ripped up this section because it was causing issues. That's the Cassino meatworks to the right. And now we've entered the helix. And there's actually a hidden siding in here, which is so hidden that not one train has ever taken access to it. So this helix is about a 3-foot diameter. It's just over 6 foot. Sorry, 3-foot radius. It's just over 6 foot diameter. So that's the downside of travelling around a helix, which is enclosed. It's a bit dark. So the next thing we come to is the Namuna ballast sighting. And just on the left here, you'll see a little incinerator flickering away on the orange. And of course, the crew here is fixing the track. Now, this Namuna ballast sighting also loads and unloads stock, which is on the right-hand side there. So again, this is the end of that particular video. Now, the next section goes from there and heads to Kyogle. You'll notice every now and again when you come through a set of points, there's some yellow paint on the track. The yellow there represents the clearance point. So if your train is past that point, you're not going to foul a train coming through on the other track. And in some other locations, there's some white paint on the rails. And that represents where there's a magnet built into the rails underneath so that the train can uncouple. And this is the next bit of scenic area on the layout. We're just going past the dead centre of town there on the right, past the bread and breakfast. We all wave to PK when we go past that place there. And there's been a bit of an accident here, so the coppers are here, and this is Fairy Hill. The roadway where the accident was Fairy Lane. Past the old, did a staff exchange on the fly. So we've got a ballast train on the loop there. And the camera was not pointing correctly, so that's why I tried to move it there. Past Fairy Hill Farm. So we've just left Fairy Hill, and then about a metre away, we now enter Kyogle. So this is Kyogle. We've got a train on the main line who hasn't dipped his headlight. He's a very naughty engineman. And this is the platform for Kyogle Station is on the right, on the other track. So that little section of video is complete. And now the next one takes us through across the Kugel spiral. So the train takes off, runs across the single track over the upper Richmond River, which has not been scenicked at all yet. And I have on display there, that's a scratch-built bridge, that one. A few trees there ready to help populate around the river. Past the Kyogle stock siding, where we load stock. And then we have a maintenance crew again. And we're coming around through the Kugel spiral. Now we're at the top of the spiral looking down to the bottom. And then we go through a tunnel and come out at Border Loop. Again, there's houses that need to be built for the signalman at this location. And bit by bit, a few trees go in, a few fettlers, sheds, walkways for the staff. And on the right there is paint in order to paint the signal box, which hasn't been painted there. Now there's only two little videos to go. And we're going to magically we've teleported from Border Loop to just short of the risk because I had an issue with the camera going through the tunnels through there. We've got a TARDIS on the right. Oh, Doctor Who gets around. And just, you'll see the yellow on the rails. In fact, you don't see it there. You'll see it at the next set of points. There's a fettler there getting warmed up by the incinerator. You can see the yellow on the rails there, which is the clearance point for the loop. This is Glenap Loop. Again, a locomotive that wasn't round in 1991 on the left. And then magically, I think it actually might have derailed there. The wagon I put the camera on hasn't been run for about 8 years. And of course, I didn't check it before I put it on. So this is entering Acacia Ridge Yard, and you can see the dual gauge track on the left there, and the narrow gauge lines to the left of that again. And a few QR locos there. And a few scratch-built wagons on the right and on the left. And one more video to go. And so we're leaving Acacia Ridge. And helps if I set the track correctly before I leave. So if I continued on the right there, it's the concentric return loops. I can head back to Grafton. Considering we're going further north, we're now on dual gauge. We make the climb towards Rockley. So there's Rockley sidings to the right there. So wagon manufacturing occurs in there. So that's why there's some new wagons there. The standard gauge comes in there. And then we come into the third rail switch sides, and then it goes over to the right-hand side there. And we're coming into Clapham Yard. And you can see the LED lights that illuminate the tracks here up at the top of the picture. Past Loco Pilly. And the narrow gauge comes in. And we're dual gauge again. And we make our way up to Dutton Park. And then at Dutton Park, the track to the right goes to Fisherman Islands. And the track to the left is where we're going. And we've got probably about a minute's left of footage to go. There's the dual gauge going off to Fisherman Islands. And we're now coming past Park Road. So Park Road sidings are there. I was lucky enough to get plans for the goods shed there, and we built that. And the next location is South Brisbane Interstate. So basically, you've just gone on a tour of most of the main line of Cassino. You can see one of the magnets in the track in front of us there. So if we want to hand back to Marty or Brad or...
Yeah, not a problem. That was excellent. I mean, so we basically went on a trip from Grafton up into
South Brisbane.
To South Brisbane itself. So, and of course we had dual gauge there representing the Queensland Railway. So what size is that?
So that's the 12 mil track, Marty. So Pico make that. Tillig make dual gauge points. So 16.5 and 12 mil.
And you can get plenty of rolling stock that runs on the 12 mil?
You can now. We've got Whiskey, you've got Southern, two manufacturers, and now 3'6" is getting back into it. And there's a couple of backyard boys who are producing stuff as well. But I think the most prolific manufacturer is one master model railroad guy called Arthur Hayes. That man
yes.
He produces more stuff for his layout than every manufacturer provided, I think.
Oh, I think we might be getting Arthur on here shortly. We'll have to get his internet up and going and his camera going, and we'll get him and his layout on here, because that is a spectacular layout.
It is.
Now, in your PowerPoint presentation, you had a couple of photos there of some of the operating sessions. So, how long would it take someone to get au fait with the layout so that they could successfully run in an operating session?
Well, there's a couple of, one in particular member who's been probably operating here for 6 or 7 years and he still can't find his way around. And no, Jeff, I'm not talking about you.
That wouldn't be Darren, was it?
No, but it could be Shelton.
Oh, okay.
No, our operating sessions are quite enjoyable.
Oh, excellent.
There's a little bit of banter. There's a little bit of drinking goes. And sometimes I like to put on a bit of a sausage sizzle before we start.
So to the Americans, a sausage sizzle would be a grilled sausage on the barbecue, slapped between some bread with onions on top and condiments of your choice.
Exactly. And the other thing that we do is, the fridge is open and there's soft drinks, there's tea and coffee, and we have a great time.
Oh, that's good. So with the dual gauge that you have there, so Queensland obviously is not the same gauge as Grafton or New South Wales. So can you enlighten the overseas visitors on the dilemma of gauges within Australia?
Says Martin Jenkins, who's a Victorian modeller, who models a different gauge again.
Yeah, 5'3". Yeah.
It's every state over here started off with a different gauge when they started building their layouts.
Yeah.
Their railways.
The one-to-one layouts.
That's right.
Yeah. No, excellent. Now, Brad was in here and he was going to get some questions out of the chat, but I don't know where he's disappeared to all of a sudden. So we'll give him a couple of minutes and see if he wants to come back. But I'll have a quick look at the chat and see if I can find something in here. I think we've got quite a few Australians in here. We've been hovering around the 105 mark while we're going there. Anthony's there. Okay, there's a lot of interest about the staff system. So John is asking, can you explain a bit on how the staff system works?
Well, the staff system, how I work, is the poor man's most simplest implementation of the real thing. So basically, there's a staff instrument at each crossing loop, and only one staff can be out at any point in time. And the owner of that staff can travel the single track between the two crossing loops. Now, trains, you could have 4 trains going in one direction, followed by 3 trains back the other way. And if you had a single staff, the odds are that when the train got to the other end and the next train needed to follow it, someone had to bring the staff back. So having these electronic staff machines, which had multiple staffs, sometimes they could have had 100 staffs in them, you could take multiple out in one direction, one after the other. So the person who had the staff in their hand had access to that trackage. And when he gets to the other end, he puts it in the machine and syncs the staff.
Cool. Well, it looks like Gordy's dropped in.
And Brad's back.
And Brad's back here. So, Brad, did you have any question from the chat?
Howdy.
Hey, I picked up some questions in the chat there.
Okay, fire away.
So one of the ones really early on from Brooks, I think in Texas, was what camera did you use to do the engineer on board videos, and how did you do those?
So I had a an open wagon, it was actually a flat wagon. And this morning I had to go over to a mate's place who had a camera and borrow it, because I had a camera that I had used for quite some time, but I hadn't used it for 8 years and it doesn't work anymore. So I ordered a new one on Monday, and COVID-19 has stopped being delivered. So I didn't have an opportunity to actually do anything previously, but I've got a Polaroid little camera, which is right here. It's got a magnet on the bottom, sits above the bogie, and stays there on the container wagon, and the locomotives push it. And of course, it was a sound loco, and I was blowing the horn at level crossings and all sorts of stuff. But there was no sound captured on the camera. So, not that I could stream the sound through this method either, but
no, that's fine. It's still great. The commentary was fantastic. It was just like watching the Ashes. Just saw lots of sandpits and stuff like that around.
So who owns the Ashes at the moment?
Yeah, he's a bit cheeky, isn't he? He doesn't want to bring up the fact that they don't own the Ashes at the moment. So, but then again, I'm biased because I'm sitting on both sides of the fence.
So our US people will say, what's cricket?
You can't open your presentation. Yeah, you can't open your presentation with here's the Poms getting beat at the Gabba without expecting a comeback. You know? And we'll not. I promise we won't start singing the Barmy Army songs to you, because we've got people in the States that are going, "What's cricket and what's the Barmy Army already?" Yeah. So don't even worry about what the Ashes are. So I think we're good, Marty, and
I think we are.
Probably move on to pie. I've got some ice cream. Hopefully everyone's got ice cream and raspberry pie for your clinic. And
okay, well
I think we're ready for raspberry pies, and
we'll say thanks to Craig, and we'll leave Cassino, located on the outer suburbs of Brisbane, and we'll go for a little intermission, and I'll get myself set up here.
Thanks, everyone.